What three things have to go right for the Oklahoma Sooners in 2025?
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase over at Game Time. I'm John Williams. You can read my work covering the Sooners over at SoonersWire.com. You can also follow the show on all of your favorite social media platforms. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. The Oklahoma Sooners have to return to contention in 2025. Have to. Absolutely have to. If Brent Venables wants to stay off the hot seat, he's got to have Oklahoma in contention. And for me, being in contention means they have to enter November 8-1 at minimum. Because with that final 3-game stretch where you face Alabama, Missouri, and LSU, you don't have a whole lot of room for error if you want to make the playoffs. If you want to contend for an SEC title, that's where you've got to be. But a lot's going to have to go right for the Oklahoma Sooners if they want to get to that point. This is a team that had a lot of flaws in 2024, not just on the offensive side of the ball, not just because of injuries, not just because of quarterback play. Some of it was coaching, but a lot of things went wrong for Oklahoma last year. And you cannot rely on the fact that, okay, maybe if we're just healthier, maybe we get to 10-2. I don't think a healthy Oklahoma team gets to 10-2 in 2024. Maybe you get to 8-4, but I don't think the presence of a healthier wide receiver room is necessarily going to get you to 10-2 last year. I think it might be good enough for 1 or 2 more wins, but that's not going to be enough to get you into contention in 2025. So what has to go right for the Oklahoma Sooners? I'm going to start on the defensive side of the ball. And a lot of the focus on defense has been at cornerback. And I get it. I totally get it. You want to see some guys emerge and to be able to be lockdown corners at the cornerback position. But Oklahoma has had good defensive play at times throughout the Brent Venables tenure, especially 2023, 2024, without having elite cornerback play. What really helped them take a step forward in 2024 as a defense was their defensive line play. The emergence of Jaden Jackson, of Gracen Halton, of Mason Thomas. That elite defensive line play put a lot of teams in some really bad situations. And yes, your cornerback group got beat on some big plays. The Missouri game, the LSU game in particular. The Ole Miss game, where the tight ends were absolutely killing Oklahoma's secondary. If you can improve your pass rush to be more consistent throughout the game in all 4 quarters, and you're not solely reliant on Mason Thomas to generate rush or Gracen Halton to generate rush, then perhaps you're not leaving your cornerbacks on an island or having to cover for 5-6 seconds to make a play. So I think the first thing that has to go right for Oklahoma in 2025 is continuing to improve that pass rush. We know the run defense is going to be good. We know that those guys in the interior, your linebacker core, are going to be really, really good against the run. They were really good against the run last year. And there's no reason to assume that they won't be good against the run this year. So that's going to put a lot of teams in some longer down and distances, 2nd down and long, 3rd down and long. And yes, you've got to be able to cover. You've got to. There's some good wide receivers in the SEC. At the same time, you're not going to be facing the same caliber of quarterback play that you saw in 2024. You might see some improved play. If Arch Manning is everything that everybody expects him to be, you might be seeing a better quarterback in the Red River Showdown than you saw when you played Quinn Ewers. But I don't think you're going to see better quarterback play when you face Ole Miss. I don't think you're going to see better quarterback play when you face Alabama. Auburn, it could be better, depending on what Jackson Arnold shows up. If it's Jackson Arnold from his true freshman season in 2023, where the dude didn't really think much and he just got out there and he slung the football around and made big plays in the passing game, they could be better. But elsewhere, I don't know that Oklahoma is going to be seeing better quarterback play. Lenore Sellers will probably be better when Oklahoma faces him in South Carolina. Garrett Nussmeier might be better this next year if he takes a second year jump. I was listening to Locked On SEC with Chris Gordy, and he was talking about the SEC jump, or the second year jump, that guys like Jaden Daniels and Joe Burrow had that led to Heisman Trophy seasons. If Garrett Nussmeier can follow that same trend and trajectory, I mean, he might light it up this year and be a much better quarterback than even he was in 2024, but he was stinking good in Oklahoma's loss to the Tigers at the end of the season. So you're going to be putting a lot of these quarterbacks into second and third and long situations. And that's where you need to see a guy like Marvin Jones Jr. take over. And that's the first thing for me that has to go right for the Oklahoma Sooners defense, is you got to see it in the emergence of Marvin Jones Jr. And he's got to take that step. He's got to become the guy that everybody's expected him to be since he signed as a 5-star prospect out of high school. The length is there. The athleticism is there. This is the year that he's got to break out. R. Mason Thomas, the tape's out on him. Everybody knows that they got to watch for him. Every offensive coordinator knows that they've got a game plan for R. Mason Thomas. So you've got to find a pass rusher opposite of him to significantly improve the pass rush and provide a threat for all 4 quarters, so that at the end of the Missouri game, you're not seeing R. Mason Thomas getting triple teamed on a 3rd and 16. Marvin Jones Jr. has to emerge. This is the year he's got to be a breakout player. The easiest way to take pressure off of your cornerback group is to take a pass rush and help it to ascend and make it elite. Put pressure on the quarterback, and they're not going to be able to be as accurate. They're not going to be able to get the ball off. We saw what Ohio State was able to do against Nico Iamaleava. If they can do the same thing, if Oklahoma can do the same thing, they'll be cooking with fire, cooking with gas. That's the saying. The second thing that has to go right for the Oklahoma Sooners, John Mateer has to be the John Mateer that we saw last year for Washington State. Actually, he's got to be better. He's got to be more consistent. He had some stinko passing performances last year. Some games where he did not have a very high completion percentage. And if you're going to be the quarterback at Oklahoma, if you're going to lead Oklahoma back to the playoffs, back into title contention, you cannot afford to have some of these passing performances that John Mateer had against some of the defenses that Oklahoma will play. Against Texas Tech, he was just 9 of 19. Now, he ran for 197 yards, which is crazy from a quarterback. But when you're facing some of the caliber of defenses that Oklahoma is going to face in the SEC, you've got to be better than 47.4%. When they played Wyoming, he was 16 to 22 for 72.7%, only threw for 182 yards, ran only for 56 yards at 3.1 yards per carry, had a touchdown and an interception in the loss to Wyoming. And so while John Mateer put up great numbers at Washington State, I need him to be even better than what he was against Washington State. I've got to see him make the second year jump himself in the Ben Arbuckle system, from the first year as a starter to the second year as a starter. I need to see him take advantage of the supposedly improved talent that is going to be around him at wide receiver and hopefully along the offensive line. That's going to make him better. We'll get to my third thing that Oklahoma has to have go right for them in 2025 coming up next. We're also going to talk about National Signing Day, what some of the more prominent outlets had to say about Oklahoma's recruiting class. There's some positive, some negative. We'll discuss all that here on today's show of Locked On Sooners. But coming up next, my third thing that has to go right for the Oklahoma Sooners here on Locked On Sooners. Looking for tickets to your next big event, whether it's a concert or a comedy show or a sports game, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache. But with Game Time Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Game Time Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. The curated deals make it super simple to find great tickets at a great price. No more sifting through thousands of options. And the Seat View feature is a game changer. Before I even hit buy, I can see exactly what my seat will look like in the venue. It's incredibly reassuring. And the best part, you're covered with the Game Time's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Ready to make your next event even better? Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed over at Game Time. Thanks again for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So in addition to a guy like Marvin Jones Jr. emerging and becoming a breakout star for the Oklahoma Sooners, living up to that 5-star billing that came with his high school recruitment, and the emergence of John Mateer being even better than what he was in 2024, the offensive line has to be incredibly improved from what it was in 2024. It has to return to at least what we saw out of that group in 2023. Was it a Joe Moore award-winning offensive line in 2023? Nope. But it was good enough. It was good enough to win 10 games. It was good enough to have a really good offense, to have one of the best offenses in the country that season. But it's got to be much better than what we saw in 2024. Did injuries play a part? Absolutely. Was it the only part? Not a bit. You had to rely on some young guys that weren't quite ready to step into significant roles. And at the same time, you've got to prepare your entire roster like they got to be ready to play. If 2024 taught us anything, it's that everybody on the roster, everybody on the depth chart, whether you're the number 1 wide receiver or you're wide receiver 9, you're the number 1 offensive tackle, or you're the number 5 offensive tackle, you've got to be ready to play. From a mental standpoint, from a physical standpoint, you've got to be ready. You cannot rely upon, hey, the plan is to redshirt this year. You can't rely on the idea that, hey, there are 3 veterans in front of me. It's very unlikely I'm going to play. No, you've got to be ready. Every single person's got to be ready on this roster because injuries are going to happen. Will they happen to the same extent that they happened in 2024? Probably not, but they're going to happen. So you got to be ready to go. The job of this coaching staff is to make sure that everybody on this roster is ready to go come 2025. And so along the offensive line, you've got to be better. This unit, in which Oklahoma has taken so much pride in over the years, whether it's because they've got the most NFL offensive linemen in the Super Bowl with Lane Johnson and Creed Humphrey and Wanye Morris and McKay Matire, albeit on the practice squad. They've got a number of offensive linemen that are playing at a high level at the NFL level. Creed Humphrey, Anton Harrison, Tyler Guyton, the most recent examples of how incredibly talented offensive linemen get produced by the University of Oklahoma. And yet, your offensive line was an incredible weakness in 2024, and it can't happen again. For Oklahoma to get where it wants to go, it has to have a really good offensive line. And what we saw in 2024 is not going to be near good enough. Were there times that it was good? Yeah. Against Alabama, the way they ran the football, that was the best performance of the season. They had moments where they provided good pass protection for the quarterback, but the quarterback was unwilling to throw the ball. Or the wide receivers weren't getting open and he couldn't find a guy to throw it to. But there were times that the offensive line provided good enough pass rush or pass protection, But it's got to be more consistent. Whether it was the South Carolina game or the Ole Miss game, those kind of games can't happen in 2025. You can't have games where you're giving up 5, 6 sacks. I know they accredited South Carolina to 10 sacks or something stupid, but even if it's a 5, 6 sack game, you can't afford that. You can't afford to put your offense in those kind of situations where they're having to overcome 2nd and 15, 3rd and 26, that kind of stuff. So the offensive line has to be better from the get-go. No more feeling it out. No more, hey, we got half the season to kind of figure out what we're going to be along the offensive line. No, you got to be ready to go day one. Because week 2, you've got Michigan. And that is not going to be a walk in the park. I don't care who they lost to the NFL. I don't care who's coming back, who they might have lost to the transfer portal. Michigan is going to have a good defense. It's going to have a good defensive front, and you've got to be ready to go. You got to have your best 5 ready and out there week 1 so that those guys can gel under fire, and be ready to play a really tough Michigan team, a team that a lot of people are expecting to be a bounce back candidate in 2025. So if you want to get off on the right foot, you've got to have your offensive line even better than what you've had in recent years, because there are no off weeks in the SEC. You're going to have to be ready to go. Come SEC play, that line is going to have to be gelling and playing their best football, because you play Auburn and then you're going to have the Red River Showdown. You got South Carolina, and that stretch of games, starting with the Red River Showdown to the end of the season, no off weeks. There's no quote unquote easy game. You're going to face tough defensive fronts throughout. And so this is a unit, again, that Oklahoma has taken a lot of pride in over the years, that has to show the same level of intensity and physicality that they showed in the Alabama game, and show it all year long, so that they can help this Oklahoma team get back to respectability, get back to contender status, and potentially make a playoff push. But if the offensive line isn't very good, then it's going to have John Mateer kind of running for his life a little bit. But I think the combination of what the offensive line does and who John Mateer is going to make everybody better around them. I think the offensive line is going to be better than what it was last year. You've got better depth than what you had a year ago. You've got talent with experience and guys like Derek Simmons and Luke Baklenko, who played fairly good football, albeit not at the SEC level. You've got incredible prospects coming in Michael Fasusi and Ryan Foje at offensive tackle, Darius Afalava at guard, Owen Hollenbeck at center, adding to a group of interior players like Josh Isosa and Eddie Pierre-Louis. Heath Ozida emerging last year was a bright spot. Logan Howland at times was a bright spot as well. You've got to get some health luck with Jacob Sexton, Jake Taylor. But ultimately, you've got to find your best 5, and you got to find it early. You can't go into the season still trying to mix and match and figure it out. You got to just figure out who those 5 best are coming out of fall camp. And preferably midway through fall camp, so that those 5 get at least a couple weeks of practice where they are getting all the first team reps and you're not rotating and mixing and matching. So offensive line has to be the best, one of the best units on this team for Oklahoma to be a contender, for things to go right for them in 2025. One of those guys could be an impact freshman. On3 named several impact freshmen that could stand out in their first seasons at the collegiate level. And ESPN, not so high on what Oklahoma did in the 2025 recruiting class. We'll discuss all that coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 players' projections, and if you're right, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw 1 yard to win. Pair that with one more correct pick and you're cashing out. This week, I'm looking at the board and selecting more for Travis Kelce on receiving yards and more for Patrick Mahomes passing yardage. What I love most, fast, safe withdrawals. When I win, my cash is in my account in as little as 15 minutes. Check out the promo tab to tail any of the super sweet milli winners, big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Thanks again for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Tune in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. The Oklahoma Sooners 2025 recruiting class was pretty uneventful on National Signing Day on February the 5th, but that's because they were pretty much done. They had their 18 guys locked in, locked up, and they were ready to roll and getting ready for spring ball. They got their winter workouts underway, and it's going to be a very fascinating spring ball season because there are a lot of jobs up for grabs on both sides of the ball, and the position battles are going to be fast and furious. One of those places that there are going to be several position battles taking place might be a place where a freshman could make an impact. On three believes that Michael Fasusi could be one of those guys that makes an impact. Cody Belair had this to say about Michael Fasusi. He says, Michael Fasusi has the potential to become a pillar along Oklahoma's offensive line the second he steps on campus. The Sooners front struggled last season and needs an infusion of talent and consistency. At 6'5", 300 pounds with 35-inch arms, Fasusi has a college-ready build to play in the SEC right away. He's a violent blocker with tremendous pop in his hands. That skill set allows him to be the type of people mover that Oklahoma needs. Fasusi finished the cycle as the top-ranked offensive tackle in the nation, according to the On3 industry ranking. Yeah, if he plays violently and he plays with good technique, I don't see any reason why he might not be able to put, or why he couldn't push for a role on Oklahoma's offensive line. Could he start early? We'll see. But I could see a Caden Green type emergence at some point during the season where, you know, once you get him into practice, once you get him some game reps, what you find out is that the dude is just ready to play. A lot's going to be on his plate and a lot's going to be up to him to make sure that he's ready to go and capable of contributing early. But that only comes if you know the playbook and technically you're sound. And if he can do those two things, there's not really a player on the roster that has the skill set that he comes to Norman with. And it's a dude that has future NFL prospects if he develops the right way and he goes about things the right way and he continues to improve his game. So Michael Fasusi is one on the offensive side of the ball that could very well see a significant role in 2025. On the defensive side of the ball, one dude I'm kind of looking at, Trent Wilson. Oklahoma has not been shy about playing some of their freshmen along the defensive line. Jaden Jackson was able to earn a starting role for the Sooners. Now, I don't think Trent Wilson comes in and takes a starting defensive tackle role from Gracen Halton. I don't necessarily think that he will, blow by David Stone on the defensive tackle depth chart, but I do think that he could find himself carving out a role at the three technique position, maybe past, if they play Jaden Jackson at the three technique, which is that place between the guard and the tackle, and David Stone is number two coming off the bench, Gracen Halton is starting, David Stone is number two. I can see Trent Wilson being the number three guy that plays that three technique position. Because at nose tackle, you're likely playing, Dominic Williams, Jaden Jackson, and then Marcus Strong or Davin Sears, who's returning to Oklahoma out of the transfer portal. So Trent Wilson, that's a guy that could emerge. The other one, Trystan Haynes, a dude that was a big riser in the final rankings, ended up at number 100 in 247 Sports player rankings. Cornerback is a bit of a question, right? I know it's not the position I mentioned when I talked about what has to go right for Oklahoma, but it is a question mark for the Sooners. You've got Eli Bowen, and you like the promise that he showed in 2024. You got to see him take a step. You like Jacobe Johnson and the size that he brings. He's got to emerge and prove it in spring and fall camp that he's ready to be a starter for you at cornerback. You like Gentry Williams. You just need him to be healthy. You like Cortland Guillory. You like Jeremiah Newcomb, Malik Hawkins. But do any of those guys emerge and take a role? Or can Trystan Haynes be the guy at the cornerback position that comes in and plays early? I could see him, or I could see a guy like Malik Hawkins coming in and playing early. And Malik Hawkins is going to have that NFL pedigree, that Division I pedigree from his father, Mike. He's going to know what to expect when he gets on campus, and he's going to know what he has to do in order to play for Brent Venables defense. So those are a few guys that I think could make impacts as true freshmen for Oklahoma. Now, ESPN, they talked about some of their winners and losers from National Signing Day or from the 2025 recruiting class. And the most disappointing class was Oklahoma, according to ESPN's staff. Nobody put their name on it. But basically what it comes down to is they didn't necessarily love the decommitment of Kevin Sperry, who was a 4-star according to ESPN. They didn't love the defensive backs that they brought in because they only brought in one player ranked in the top 300, being Trystan Haynes. And they think that Oklahoma could have done a little bit more at wide receiver and tight end. They only had 2 receivers commit in Elijah Thomas and Emmanuel Choice, and then 1 tight end in Trine Washington. But again, given kind of what Oklahoma did in the transfer portal, what they've got coming back from their 2024 signing class in Ivan Carrion, Zion Reagans, and Zion Kearney, did you have room to add 2 more wide receivers? Because you bring in Giovanni Gibson, Keontez Lewis, Josiah Martin, and Isaiah Satania, and those guys have potentially multiple years of eligibility. And then you bring in, or you return the 3 guys I mentioned from the 2024 class. You bring in Elijah Thomas and Emmanuel Choice, who have the potential to factor in early at wide receiver. Do you have enough room to bring in a Gracen Harris or a Marcus Harris at wide receiver? Oklahoma's banking on the idea that, hey, we were going to probably have to cut guys or process guys after spring ball because of the roster restrictions that everybody's going to be facing now. 105 players. That's it. That's all you can be on your roster. 20 of those can be walk-ons. In the SEC, you can only have 85 scholarships. So you're going to have to make some tough choices. So Oklahoma's recruiting class didn't finish very well in the recruiting rankings. They were 16th, I think, according to On3, 17 and 18 with ESPN, 247 Sports, and Rivals. Not getting a lot of love. They were 9th or 10th, ninth at best, but basically 10th in the SEC. That's not going to be good enough long term. But part of it is because they took a smaller class. Most of those schools that finished in the top, they were taking 25, 26. Georgia freaking took 28 players. Pardon my language. They took 28 players in this recruiting class and finished with one of the best blue chip ratios in the country for the recruiting cycle. Oklahoma, at one point, they were number 6 in blue chip ratio. They finished number 8. Not great, but it puts them still in a position to have a blue chip laden roster. And that's what it's going to take for Oklahoma to win and win big. I don't mind them taking a few flyers on the 3-star guys, and I trust the evaluations of the coaching staff. At the same time, you're going to have to hit big on all of your blue chip players to be significant contributors for you in 2025 and down the road. If you want to contend, the recruiting class is going to have to hit. And it starts with Michael Fasusi and Ryan Foje, goes to Trystan Haynes, but all the way down to the lower ranked guys that maybe people aren't thinking a whole lot about. Those guys got to hit. I mean, Marcus James, the only linebacker you took in the class, he's got to hit because you only took one linebacker in the 2024 cycle in James Nesta, and it's been a minute. In your 2023 guys, you brought in Lewis Carter, Samuel Masigo, Phil Picciotti. Well, Lewis Carter, Phil Picciotti, they're gone. They're off to UCF. You only have Samuel Masigo remaining from that group. Out of your 2022 class, you still have Kobe McKenzie and you still have Kip Lewis and Jaren Canning, but Jaren Canning might be moving to the offensive side of the ball. So you're going to have to hit on those guys where you only took one player at that position. You don't have any room for error. Trine Washington at tight end, that's another place where you have to hit. Torrey Blaylock at running back, that's a place you're going to have to hit. Even though you've got young runners in Xavier Robinson and Taylor Tatum out of the 2024 class that are going to be on campus for several more years, Torrey Blaylock, he's going to have to hit. You got to get that kind of production out of him. And so I think Oklahoma's class is just fine. Is it the best class in the nation? No, and that's disappointing, no doubt. You need Oklahoma to start getting themselves into the top 3, the top 4 of these recruiting rankings. The places where Alabama and Georgia have lived for so long, Ohio State has lived for so long. Oklahoma's got to find a way to break through and get themselves up at the top. And it might be NIL. That's going to be the thing that has to change the game for Oklahoma. And if they can be a little bit more competitive in the NIL, on the NIL front at the recruiting ranks, at the high school ranks, then that might give them an opportunity to push a little bit higher, a little bit earlier. And so much is going to depend on how Brent Venables performs and how Oklahoma performs in 2025. If they're a winning team, they make the playoff, that's going to give them a boost. If not, we could be looking at a coaching change and resetting, and it might take some time to rebuild Oklahoma's recruiting cachet if that's the case. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in, being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. You can read my work covering the Sooners over at SoonersWire.com. Follow Jay at Unfair Sports. Check out his channel, Unfair Sports, over on YouTube as well. And follow the show wherever you get your podcasts and wherever you like to be on social media. We are there. So follow us, subscribe to the show. But until next time, I'm John Williams, Boomer Sooner.